Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, and I want to thank you and other members of this panel who have been working for some time on this issue. I think Senator McCaskill, Senator Shaheen, Senator Gillibrand, obviously, and I've been privileged to be involved in some of the work that has preceded this hearing, but I think the hearing is critically important because it really highlights why we're here today, which is that in the aftermath and the wake of 10 years of war, we want to assure that we continue to have in our military the best, the brightest, and the bravest. And obviously sexual assault is one of the primary and predominant obstacles to attracting and retaining good people to our military. And so it's not just the victims, although we deeply respect and care for the horrific experience that you've encountered, it is the national interest that brings us here today. And it is the interest of our extraordinary military that also brings us here today. They have demonstrated that they are aghast and disgusted by this problem and that they are acting to do something about it. Not just Defense Secretary Hagel, but I believe many of our leaders in the military, and that they will do something about it. So I viewed today's hearing as a cooperative effort, cooperative between this panel and our Department of Defense in seeking to address a problem that ought to have zero tolerance, literally zero tolerance. As a parent of two sons who are currently serving in the military, and one who serves on this panel and has spent some of the best moments of my 2 years as a member of the Senate with our military, 3 times visiting Afghanistan, having the privilege of working with many of our military, I believe that we have in our military right now the next greatest generation. And that if we can deal with this problem, we will assure that we continue to have that quality of people in the military, and I believe the leaders of our military are determined to make it so. But this issue is more complicated than just making a speech or saying that we have zero tolerance. Literally, deterrence is in the details. And I say that as a former prosecutor, as United States Attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years, as State Attorney General for 20 years. The details of evidence, of sentencing, of review and appeal are what will enable us to solve this problem. And I really welcome the suggestion, for example, that we have independent prosecutorial authority outside the chain of command, which might be welcomed by many of the officers who have to make these decisions. And I think these issues ought to be explored. You know, the Wilkerson case is extraordinary, not just for the reversal of the decision and the conviction, but the sentence was only a year, as I understand it. And even more troublingly, and I'm going to quote from the full statement, Mr. Lewis, that was provided by the victim, I endured 8 months of public humiliation and investigations, interviews by OSI and the prosecution, apparently without an attorney. And to continue the quote, I was interrogated for several hours by Wilkerson's legal counsel without the benefit of legal counsel myself. She was interrogated by hours by the defense counsel without any aid of an attorney herself. So let me ask you, Ms. Bagwadi, would you suggest that we ought to have not just a victim's advocate, but a victim's advocate who would serve in effect as legal representation for the victim, so that that victim's rights and perhaps expanded rights would be better protected?
Senator, that's a very sensible recommendation or suggestion, and I would refer you to the Air Force's pilot program. I imagine General Harding will be touching on that in a few hours, but it's a very by all accounts, we've actually referred a couple of clients, just for this purpose, airmen who have needed that extra buffer, because it's an incredibly intimidating process, even under the best circumstances, because there's so much hierarchy and power and intimidation in the process of coming forward. And yes, that measure, as it's been briefed to us, even goes beyond what civilian victims have, which is fantastic, because military victims do need that extra buffer because of the hierarchical nature or environment in which they operate every single day, especially junior enlisted troops.
Well, we should be very clear. Civilian victims who come forward do so in a highly intimidating process. And they have needed, I can tell you as one who has seen this process improve over the years, they've needed the kind of advocacy that the military is beginning to provide. And I commend the pilot program that's been started, and we will be hearing later from folks who can tell us more about it. But I ask you as victims or their advocates now, whether that kind of separate unit, which I've advocated, ought to be made institutional.
I believe it should be. And I would just add, I do think there's extra pressure on military victims. It is a very different environment.
Absolutely.
It's a confined environment in which you cannot quit your job or you will be charged, right? In the civilian environment, rape, assault, and harassment are horrendous under any condition in any environment. But within the military, you just have less freedom of movement, less access, and you have this incredibly hierarchical system in which 9 times out of 10, you are told to stay silent. That's how we're trained in basic training in officer candidate school, not to talk back.
And Ms. Havrilla, I think you have highlighted that point by calling attention to the culture within your unit, the practices within your unit, which in essence were unreviewable because of both the physical and the command structure that you encountered.
Yeah, it's something that I saw, outside of my unit as well. I spent the majority of my time with infantry, special forces, and combat engineers. I spent 99% of my time deployed as the only female. So, I've had exposure to other units and other capacities, and there were some that were just as bad, and there were some that were not. There were some that treated me with absolute professional respect and dignity, and I never had any problems with some. So, in my mind, it really does kind of come to what is allowed, what does that leadership say goes and doesn't go, and where they draw their lines, and that filters down to the lower levels and continues to do so.
My time, unfortunately, has expired, but I just want to close by saying that your testimony in particular, really all of your testimony, calls attention to the need for prevention. Part of it is deterrence. I say that as a prosecutor. I'm a big believer in deterrence, firm punishment, excellent prosecution, but also education. And I know the military has begun using an extraordinary documentary called Invisible War, which I hope will be shown to everybody, all of our brave men and women in the armed forces, so that we can prevent the kind of unit culture that you have described so movingly. And I just really want to thank all of you for being here today, for having the courage to step forward, but also for your service in our military. And thank all of the military and veterans who are present here today for your service as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal.
This has been a Sunfish production.